Imagine a Hyperion, only it doesn't deal magical damage. This weapon acts very similarly to a Hyperion, however it's actually a melee weapon. I mean, for all intensive purposes, a Hyperion is a sword and a sword is a melee weapon, but you'd be very silly to use a Hyperion just for its melee capabilities. I have to be honest, when I right click with this weapon, it seems pretty similar to a Hyperion. But this weapon is most definitely not a Hyperion, and it's definitely nowhere near the price either. Believe it or not, it's a Felthorn Reaper. A longsword introduced into the game really not that long ago in reality. And while it does have some decent regular melee stats, its right click ability really is like a melee version of the Hyperion, which is very strange. Its right click ability, Reaving Strike, slashing a huge arc dealing 135% melee damage to all enemies hit, which as the ability suggests, is actually very good for clearing. And honestly, it's quite easily mistakable for Hyperion. I mean, as long as you don't use First Sky, and then you'd probably notice. But obviously, unlike the Hyperion, you can optimize everything for melee damage. On top of its right click ability, its actual straight up melee damage is very good and very, very comparable to a Shadow Fury. In fact, it deals maybe something like 2 or 3% less damage when I've done my tests. But it is honestly very close. This weapon in its current configuration set me back around about 55 million coins from the auction house. And sure, its damaging figures aren't quite that of the Hyperion. A right click is going to deal, what, let's see, just shy of 1 million damage. But for most circumstances, I mean, this weapon has Soul Eater 2, which is going to work. It's good enough, and especially in dungeons, this is going to scale massively. And in the end, to the Voidling Fanatics, we can deal around about 1.3, 1.4 million, which is pretty cool. Or if we decide to use our right-click ability, didn't quite see how much damage that was, over 1.6 million. Now, the one main drawback that this weapon has is you can't unlimitedly spam this weapon, okay? So you have basically 5 charges, and those 5 charges kind of regenerate after a certain period of time. As you can see in the bottom right of my screen, that indicates we have 5 charges. And if we were to right-click, one of them disappears. We right-click again, and it disappears again. And if we wait a couple of seconds, they'll regenerate. And if we do look at the stats, of course, they regenerate every 4 seconds. So it's not the end of the world. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and try this out in dungeons. But before we do, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS and get yourself 5% off. Also, you should subscribe to the channel. If you're not subscribed and you watch the videos, make sure to do so. You should also join the Discord server. It's linked in the description of this video. We offer slayers and dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Now, we're going to use a Necron setup, of course. It is a little bit scuffed, like this chestplate doesn't have any gemstones on it, and the leggings do, but then the boots have 1, and we have wisdom. It doesn't matter though, it's fine. Now, something else that's cool about this sword is it gets a base swing range of plus 1.5. Of course, it is a longsword. And if you couple that with the rest of the buffs that you get from the Berserk class within dungeons, that's really nice. Meaning that without even considering its right-click ability, the regular weapon on its own is really good. And now to test its clearing capabilities, I mean, that's pretty good. Can't really lie. Once again, let's give it another go. Honestly, it's so comparable to Hyperion in that sense where you just simply right-click, and of course, maybe you can't spam it quite as much. And maybe our right-clicks don't deal quite as much damage. I mean, it's still pretty decent. 30 million damage is not bad by any accounts. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, of course, you can get, in the billions of damage in dungeons if you really do have an optimized setup and you're in higher floors, but, you know, this is only floor 6. Okay, let's see. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I mean, quite easily... I mean, my only criticism would be, is you can quite easily spam through those 5 charges. I guess you've just got to kind of be conservative. But yeah. And yeah, against these terracottas, the right-click... I mean, I didn't really have 5 charges there. But yeah, you can tell it's pretty effective. But the only thing I would say is you do have to be relatively careful, because, like, there are my charges gone already. You know what I mean? It's very easy to kind of just burn straight through them. Now, to be completely honest, the issue that I find with most melee weapons in Hypixel Skyblock is just simply the fact that they're all the same. I made a video on this a few days ago, and it gets to a point where you can kind of deal enough damage to do whatever you want. So kind of what's the point in buying an upgrade that is not really going to do much other than increase your base damage a little bit, but still basically allow you to kill the mobs that you were able to kill before? And I do truly think that there needs to be more to a melee weapon. Using a Dark Claymore for melee purposes, I mean, it doesn't have a right-click ability. it doesn't have a special ability. It has 2 swing range, but this weapon that I'm using right here has 1.5 swing range. And while sure, realistically it has the best damaging stats of all weapons on the game, its damaging stats aren't really too different to a giant sword. And the giant sword's damaging stats aren't massively different to a Shadow Fury. Shadow Fury damaging stats isn't massively different to this weapon that I'm using right here. I'm not saying this is just as good as any other melee weapon, because for one hit damage and regular damaging stats it's not. But at least this weapon actually offers something else in its ability. Nobody uses the giant sword for its right click ability. Nobody does. The Dark Claymore doesn't have a right click ability. And while the Shadow Fury's ability is a bit different, you know, in majority of scenarios it's not massively useful. Plus there is obviously a cooldown like there is on most things. And while this weapon does have a cooldown, and I'm calling it the melee Hyperion, and there's nothing really that's similar to it that you could probably classify as being close to a Hyperion, so I guess that makes sense. I mean, at the same time, its radius is, like, obviously nowhere near that of a Hyperion. But Berserk has never been great for clearing, but within dungeons, because a lot of the mobs are clustered together, this is actually good for clearing. I just like the fact that it offers something different, and I feel like this weapon in particular is definitely moved in the right direction. On top of that, it isn't ridiculously expensive, and it also deals good damage. I've talked about the Fell Sword in the past, and the Fell Sword is actually really good for its price. Its base damaging stats do fall a little bit short to something like the Felthorn Reaper's base damaging stats, however it is considerably cheaper. When we test our damage with the Fell Sword, our damage we deal is about 670k, as opposed to 707k with the Felthorn Reaper. But you do get a good right click ability, and you do get plus 1.5 swing range. Whereas the Fell Sword's right click ability basically buffs the healer class in dungeons. Well, the base damage isn't too different. But honestly, for the price at which you can pick up a decent Felthorn Reaper with Soul Eater 5, Recombobulated, 5-starred, fragged, hot potatoed, with your, I guess, decent enough enchants, it's really not bad value for money. 56 million coins in the climate of this economy for a weapon this useful is really not bad. It really isn't. And when you put that up against its competitors or maybe alternatives, then you actually come to realise that it's actually on the cheaper side. Another weapon that will probably fall under a similar category as the Felthorn Reaper in terms of a melee weapon that actually has a good right-click ability will be something like the Bouquet of Lies. Its right-click ability is actually really good. But for everything else, the right-click ability is just a little bit mid. And I feel like for melee weapons on Hypixel Skyblock in 2024, we need a bit more. We really do. But anyway, that is just about going to wrap up today's video. Let me know what you think in the comments of the Felthorn Reaper. Have you used it? Are you going to use it? Have you never used it? Do you think it's bad? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's good value for money? Let me know. You might think I'm completely wrong. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.